Hello everyone, this is Dominique Amara from Ordinary Doing Extraordinary Ministries, and in my previous video I posed the question, can God use weak people? Well, if you didn't see the video, the answer is a resounding yes. Now, many people that God used had significant weaknesses. So in today's video, I am going to discuss 3 people that God used despite their weaknesses. So stay tuned. So the first person that we are going to talk about is Moses. Now, Moses is one of my favorite characters because I can relate to him in some ways, and mainly in this way of feeling weak and not good enough to be able to speak and be engaging. And that is what Moses was struggling with when God called him in Exodus chapters 3 and 4. Now we see in Exodus chapter 3 verse 11 where Moses posed the question to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? I mean, can you imagine God calling you to do such a big thing and you're like, why me? And that's how Moses felt. He was so focused on himself. Like, how could you choose me? Well, Exodus chapter 3 verse 12, God answered that question. Basically, he reminded Moses who he was. He's like, I will certainly be with you. That tells you who God is. Like, instead of asking the question, who am I? We should be asking, who is God? Like, he is so mighty and so powerful and so big. He can do anything, and he can do anything through us. So unfortunately, that didn't really calm Moses down. He's like, yeah, but I can't talk. Like, I'm not eloquent enough. I can't do this. And God did get a little angry. His anger burned against Moses, as it says in the Bible. But he did enable Moses' brother, Aaron, to speak for him. And that worked out well. And he was able to just go ahead and do what God told him to do because he had Aaron with him. And that kind of, I'm assuming that it emboldened him and helped him to want to do what God was telling him to do. Or it may not have. Maybe he just said, you know what, I'm just going to do it and we'll see what happens. Either way, God strengthened Moses to do what he called him to do despite his weaknesses. Now, the next person I want to discuss is David. Now, you may think, okay, King David, he killed Goliath. How weak could he possibly be? Well, yeah, he did. He definitely had some courage there, more than some of the other guys, but he still had significant weaknesses. One of his main weaknesses was women. I mean, David had a lot of wives, and I can imagine they may, some of these women may have really just thought he was just this amazing guy. He probably was a handsome guy. So women were, the thing for David. Well, one day he saw a woman named Bathsheba who was taking a bath. I don't know, it was kind of a weird situation. And he saw her and he lusted after her and he wanted her and had her brought in to him. And unfortunately, he took advantage of her and then also had her husband killed. How terrible is that? I mean, he was a complete mess, right? Why would God use him? Why? Well, in Acts chapter 13, verse 22, we see that answer. David would do everything that God wanted him to do. He was a man after God's own heart. And you may ask yourself, how? How was he? He was crazy. Yeah, well, many of us can fit that description, but he still used David. And the amazing thing about it is that David was repentant for his sin. He knew that what he did was wrong. And we see that in Psalm 51, where he's talking about the incident with Bathsheba, and he was just very repentant for that. So God could see the heart of David. He saw that he was grieved by his sin. He was grieved by the things that he did. And that is a heart that God can work with. Those people who sin and don't actually feel anything is wrong, well, they might be a little more difficult, right? But David knew that he had sinned and he knew that he was wrong, and he grieved in his heart about those things and he repented. So God used him. Now, the last person that I'm going to talk about is Peter. Peter was one of the disciples that was with Jesus when he was alive. And when Jesus was on his way to being crucified, Peter denied Jesus 3 times because people were recognizing him. They're like, hey, you were with Jesus. And Peter's like, no, I wasn't. Well, yes, you were. And he denied him 3 times. He even got so bad that he cursed. He's like, I don't know this bleep Jesus. Well, I don't know what he said, but obviously the Bible says that he cursed. So obviously he was scared, frustrated, and probably even more scared. I know I said scared, but he was very scared, obviously. And so Peter denied Jesus. Now, Jesus had actually predicted this. He said that Peter was going to deny him 3 times. Peter was like, no, I would never do that, my Lord. That's exactly what he did. So when it happened, Peter recognized it and he's like, oh my God. He realized it and he wept. It really, really bothered him. So even I can imagine myself, if I were Peter, I would think at that moment, like, what a failure. I walked with Jesus and now I seriously denied him. I have seen all the things that Jesus has done and I'm going to sit here and deny him. Yeah. So imagine having to deal with that. So we see actually where Jesus still chose Peter and called him in John 21, 15 through 17. He called Peter to feed his sheep, basically to go out, spread the good news. And that is exactly what Peter did. He lived his life as a missionary until the very end, where he died as a martyr for Christ. So he was used tremendously by God. Despite his failings, his denial, he still was used by God. So he can definitely use us too. Now, there are many others in the Bible that God has used despite their weaknesses. And so basically the big idea here is that God can use you no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you may think about yourself. God can and will use you, and he can work in and through you to do extraordinary things. That's one reason why I named my ministry Ordinary Doing Extraordinary Ministries. We're ordinary people being used extraordinarily for God. So always remember that you are not too weak. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and guys, just have a wonderful, wonderful day.